The Story That Wrote Itself by A.M. Melfa. Chapter 3. Eustace awoke, laying on his back with his eyes directed towards the ceiling. Something was amiss until he remained quite still in order to process the first inundation of sensory input. Slowly he realized that the light was wrong. Most days Eustace awoke in the early morning, rising before Claude to prepare the healthy breakfast that would help his husband meet the demands of a busy workday. Thanks to the hue of the curtains, daybreak, whether bright or wan, created a lovely radiance that immersed their bedroom in a nectarine luminosity. Combined with the fact that every other surface in the room was pure white, it was as if the couple slept together in the heart of a creamsicle. From the cooler pastel blue tint of the walls, Eustace became aware that he had overshot the morning completely in favor of midday. He could not recall the last time he had slept in so late, and his consternation brought back memories of the previous evening's black nightmares. Very well did he remember the sensation of being pursued through an escherscape of failing architecture by two shroud-covered figures. The shape of the dream was amorphous, his waking brain stoutly refusing to reconstruct the finer details. He experienced a brief burst of visual memory, his body being spun and torn by a whirligig of colored streamers, and a torrent of ivory bones stabbing out to slice his flesh. As Eustace lay ensconced like a pearl in his authentic Art Deco white lacquer scalloped seashell bed, he poked around his writer's brain for the words to describe exactly how the nightmare had made him feel. Swinging his feet to the floor and directly into his perfectly placed whiter-than-white satin slippers, Eustace chuckled when his probing intellect made the connection he was looking for. Now I know what it feels like to be an unlucky extra in an H.P. Lovecraft story. I have scaled the mountains of madness too high for comfort, he mused, as he moved slowly into the kitchen to start his first French drip of the day. Passing by his white lacquer writing desk, his overstuffed Persian cat, white of course, and named Snowball after the polydactyl progenitor of Ernest Hemingway's historic brood, worked an atonal blat in his general direction. Eustace laughed and bade Sir Snowball wait for his first splash of heavy cream, running a hand across the feline's silky back, whipping the tail as he passed. Snowball responded with a flat bark and resumed the survey of his sidewalk domain from the sun-strewn second-story remove of the apartment's front window. Eustace began the calming routine of preparing his morning, this day afternoon, break of fast, but stopped short just before revving up his coffee grinder. Head tilted to one side, Eustace searched his pate for another elusive connection, the second to be presented to him already on this strangely canted day. He had nearly scratched the untoward mental itch when the cat lurched into a full-blown chunderfest, aborting his synapse connection. Leaning backwards to peer into the living room, Eustace's eyes were first drawn to a lovely mound of foaming mustard-yellow puke on the windowsill, Snowball adjacent. His line of sight slid over the cat's sick and across his writing desk to the out-of-place item that had triggered his engine to stall out while making his first beloved cup of coffee of the day. It was his laptop. Wadding up a lump of paper towels, Eustace put down the bean grinder and returned to the living room, stopping in front of the laptop, open, humming, screen black in its slumber. Huh, he whispered to Snowball as he absent-mindedly sopped up the feline's acid reflux. I know I shut this down last night. After his wandering mind had typed a stanza of poetry unbidden by his conscious brain, Eustace had deleted the offending couplets and laughed off his temporary amnesia, going so far as to joke about it with Claude that night as evidence of his looming dementia. His overactive creative mind was ready to leap into the fabulous fray when his soggy, coffee-denuded brain shouldered in with a bit of exhausted common sense. Oh, for God's sake, he cascaded himself as he plopped down onto his royal blue cushion and activated the screen via touchpad. Claude was probably checking his trading account before work. Both a reasonable assumption and a very likely explanation. As the image emerged from the depths of pixelization, Eustace was relieved to see Claude's trading account materialize onto the monitor. Positively jonesing for caffeine, Eustace padded back into the kitchen to get his fix. Once the steaming mug was in hand, he dawdled in an uncharacteristic manner, gazing blank-eyed out the small window in the kitchen, giving on to a walled atrium that comprised the center of their apartment block. His brain was locked into some sort of treacle-esque slow motion from which he was unable or unwilling to emerge. The story he was writing had strapped him onto a roller coaster of unending revelation for weeks now. Eustace had to admit to himself that while the experience was electrifying, it was also stupefying in equal proportions. Although the next section was impatiently crowding his forebrain, ready to spill out of his cortex and onto the document, Eustace could not seem to muster the will to cease staring at the way the afternoon light dashed a trembling swatch across the upper floors of his building. Thus Eustace allowed himself to sip, sway, and stare, sway, and stip away the following 20 minutes in a vacuous haze. It was only the trumpeting blare presaging the arrival of yet another snowball stomach upset that brought him back into his body. Sidestepping to the sink to wet another clot of paper towels, a crooked smile hinged the left corner of Eustace's mouth as he envisioned himself reeling in the balloon of his consciousness, which had been allowed to float far, way too far up into the stratosphere. Shuffling back into the living room, he tied the balloon off to his brain stem with a cognitive hitch knot and bent to the task of cleaning up after SSSS, Sir Snowball of the Sensitive Stomach. The fact of his late rising had caused Snowball's current puke-dicament. Like many long-haired cats, gargantuan fur balls eventually led to acid-soaked kitty dreadlocks all over the house. If Eustace had risen and fed the Persian at the proper time, then he would not be mopping up rank-smelling piles now, like a strip-show janitor. And then he had to water the plants, which were looking sad and wilty, at which point he noticed the leaves needed dusting, thus robbing him of the next half an hour of what would have normally been writing time. The dust on the leaves led to dusting the plethora of antique surfaces, all inherited from his mother, which jostled for space in every corner of the apartment. Then he figured, may as well vacuum while I'm at it. When at long last Eustace sat down in front of his laptop to start writing, he noted that it was only one half an hour until quitting time. His lips fluttered as a puffed-up sigh escaped his lungs. Might as well call it. Thus it transpired that one long, unbroken stream of sidelines prevented Eustace from actually opening his story document that day. And so it was that Eustace did not see the small note left for him by the cursor, while his soul was spirited away by the two-dimensional play of light and shadow across brick. End of chapter 3.